So, hello and welcome back to the second session of me rambling on semi incoherently about random things and thoughts I have and what's going on in my life. Today, I have a couple ideas of kind of what I want to talk about, but probably not going to end up happening. I do want to talk about some stuff that's happened recently. Like, I took the GRE yesterday, 1024, and then I watched Weathering with You with a friend today. And then I kind of just wanted to talk about my views on like where the origin of life and the meaning of life. Just kind of the ordinary topics. Really transition. Movie meaning of life goes hand in hand, doesn't it? Well, I first want to thank people I saw on the last video that I actually got 4 whole views. I expected that video to stay at 0 views for the rest of eternity. So seeing 4 views in the span of a few days, like really, that made me very happy to see. So thank you everybody for watching. I know one of my friends went and he told me he found the video and watched it, but as well as everybody else that went and watched it. Appreciate it. So yes, like I said yesterday, I took the GRE and I ended up taking it online. And even though in many of the graduate schools are not requiring the GRE this year due to COVID and the fact that some people are going to have more access to the GRE and it could exacerbate existing inequalities, for people who have access to that sort of and also because people are going to probably have detriments to the stress of COVID. It makes a little bit of sense, but I ended up signing up for the GRE like a couple of months ago, back before COVID really hit. Like, it was a thing we knew about, but I didn't realize it was going to get to the extent that it has over these last few months. So it was like, I had my test scheduled in person. I think it was in La Crosse, if I remember correctly. And then they ended up just keep rescheduling me over and over and over. And so eventually I said, screw it. I don't they scheduled me for like a Wednesday at 7 a.m. And I was like in La Crosse, which is a couple hours away from here. And I was like, no, I'm not doing that. So I rescheduled it online. And I don't remember if I mentioned in the last video, but yes, I ended up having to even reschedule it online because they don't allow you to use pencil and paper on the tests because they don't want you to have a written record of the test that you could then go and share with other people who are taking the test, because I imagine the GRE each year has the same exact questions. So, they don't want you giving your answers or your thought process to other people being the test, which kind of makes sense in retrospect, but I did not see that I couldn't use pencil and paper. So I showed up and I was like, and they're like, yeah, if you don't have pencil and paper, don't have a whiteboard, then you're just going to have to do everything in your head. And I was like, nah, I'm not doing that. So I ended up rescheduling to yesterday. And yeah, some of the questions on the test are pathetically easy. Like, I remember one question, I shouldn't even probably talk about this, but I will anyway, was like, here's the number, what's larger, 5 or 15% of 30? It's like, well, 10% of 30 is 3, so 5% is 1.5, so 4.5 when you add those two together, so 5 is bigger. And then some of the questions were absolutely ridiculous. Like, you'd have to read an entire paragraph for a math question where they'd have like 5 different symbols. Like, they had one question that had R, P, Q, S, X, all in the same question. I was like, what the heck is this? So I believe the GRE does this intentionally, where some questions are judged as very easy and some are judged as extremely difficult. But yes, and then there's also the qualitative section. The qualitative section a lot of it was like fill in the sentence with the word that makes a sense, or fill in the sentence with 2 words that make sense. And some of the questions are read this paragraph and then answer some questions about the paragraph. So what ended up happening is relative to other physical science students, because I'm a chemistry major, not to people average taking the test, I scored a little bit above average, a couple points. It's weird. It scores between 130 and 170. Who created that system? I'm real curious. Yeah, so I got a couple points above average on the qualitative reasoning and got completely average on the quantitative reasoning. But some of the quantitative reason questions. So how the format works is like each section had 20 questions, and you usually have, I think, 30 minutes to answer the 20 questions, and then there were 6 sections. So 6 sections, 20 questions each, 30 minutes each, and then you get a minute break between each section. I should say between 1 and 2 and 2 to 3, you get a minute break. And then after 3, you get a 10-minute break. And then between 4 and 5 and 5 and 6, you get a 1-minute break. But even so, it was just grueling because it was just test after test after test. And it was like the first 2 I had to write like an essay about these various prompts. One about a seafood restaurant. I was like, that one was real weird. I liked the first question a lot more because it was very abstract. It was like, yeah, I probably shouldn't say it in case the GRE people track me down. But yes. Oh, I completely lost my train of thought. Yeah, I completely lost it. But yes, so it was very grueling, I think I was saying. And so I got the average and then above average. But because most of the universities aren't even requiring the GRE this year, I probably won't even send it in. And the reason why, you might ask, yo, why didn't you just get a refund? Is because I did not want to go through the bureaucratic process of getting a refund, because I knew that would be horrendous, because I had paid many, many months in the past, and I did not want to have to go through that paperwork. So I was like, I'll just take the test. If any of the graduate schools I'm applying to need it, I'll send it in. If they don't, I just won't send it. And because I think my CV and my other stuff is good enough, I don't like my advisor said to me the GRE school score is basically if you have like a poor GPA, but you have like an exceptional GRE, then it's able to like make up for the GPA. Yeah. So that ended up happening yesterday. And then I was just like, then I just played Genshin Impact, which is Weeb, W-E-E-B, because every time I say the word weeb, one of my friends hears weed. Not weed. It's a weeb game. It's basically Weeb Breath of the Wild, and that's quite a bit of fun. And I played that with a buddy, and then I played Among Us with my residents, because I hold an event each week, Saturday 8 p.m. We have Among Us night, which is always a good time. And yeah, and then I made the slightly questionable decision of staying up until 2 o'clock playing more Genshin Impact, but things happen, whatever, man. And then also when I was playing, I matched with this really cute girl on Tinder, which was taking my attention off just a little bit from Among Us. I might have went AFK at the start of a few rounds, but And what's sad is that we were hitting it off, all good and good. She's super cute, got her Snapchat, going good. And then I didn't realize that she was only in Eau Claire she came up here to visit some friends, but she actually lives in Milwaukee, which is over 200 miles away from Eau Claire. It's like, yeah, it's going to be like a 3.5-hour trip down there at least. And I was like, oh, dang. I was like, found this girl, real nice, hit it off, and then she's down all the way there. Yeah. Oh, that makes me I remember before I ever had any interest in girls back in high school, because I was a shut-in at that point. That's its own story, but I won't go into that now. I was like, I'm just going to find like one person. I'm going to find the one, and that is going to be it. And I was like, that is not what has happened. I have, let's see, how many can I go through? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or 7 girls I've been either gone on a date with, or have seriously like engaged with. So yeah, that's not generally how it works. It takes a lot of effort. You're not going to just, it's unlikely. I shouldn't say it's not, because it's very hard in life to make these definitive 100% statements, because life is too complex for absolutes, in my opinion. It is easy. It's a simplification. And I think, like I've said to one of my friends, I think humans really like simplifications, because life is so absurdly complex and weird and disparate that it's really nice to have order and and simplifications to fight that. But how did I even get into that? Well, oh yeah, talking about the girl. So yeah, that just was like, dang, she's real cute. I would have liked to go on a date with her, but unlikely to happen going forward. Yeah, this is the result of not planning whatever you're gonna say and just kind of going off the top of your head. Oh yeah, this shirt. It's a pen exploded on this shirt, and this was also a shirt my ex wore. I have some pictures. Yeah, I remember that. I don't know why that popped into my head. My room. That would also just remind me I need to go put my laundry away. Yes, but okay. Now try to get on a little bit more of a topic. Talk about the movie I watched earlier today. I watched Weathering with You, which is from the same director who made Your Name, the highest grossing anime film of all time. And I would say it's debatable whether it's my second or third favorite film. My favorite film is undoubtedly The Social Network, but 2 and 3 would definitely go between Marriage Story and Your Name. I haven't seen Marriage Story as much as I would like. I would probably have to see it a few more. I'd probably have to watch both of them in close proximity to be able to make a clear distinction between second and third there. But yes, so Your Name is in just an absolutely wonderful film. Like, it's beautiful. Like, you get super invested in the characters. It's got great music. It's just wonderful film. Like, obviously, no film is perfect. I don't think anything is perfect. Again, I don't think anything like that's. I think perfection is a simplification that involve because anything created by people like a film is going to be subjective. Yeah, and I'll talk. I might talk about it later because I would say everything in life is created by humans. So everything is subjective. There are no facts. Everything lies on a spectrum from more in line with reality versus more aligned with opinion. But I would say, and then there's no definitive thing as absolute truth or anything like that. But that got way off topic. I was talking about the movie. Yes. So Weathering with You was created by the same director. And it follows and I should warn, I am going to talk through like the entirety of both films probably, and so spoiler warning for both Your Name and Weathering with You in case you want to see them. I don't know when I'm going to stop talking about them, so I can't give a timestamp, but the next little discussion is not going to be spoiler friendly. Yes. So yeah, my initial impression, like a lot of people's impression that I've looked up online, is that Weathering with You is a solid film, but it does not live up to Your Name's, and it was big shoes to fill. But one thing is, Weathering with You follows the exact same format as Your Name. Like, literally, okay, Your Name, you got two star-crossed lovers separated by some supernatural phenomena, and they try to overcome that to be with each other. And yes, and then exact same thing in Weathering with You. Two star-crossed lovers. Well, literally in Your Name, it was literally star-crossed lovers because that's a little bit of a major plot point. But yes, two star-crossed lovers. More in this one, it was more so you had two people coming from like their own rough respective situations. You had your main character Adoka, who was running away from his life. He wanted a better life. You never actually learn really what was so bad about his life that he just wanted to escape. There was one scene where he had some scrapes on his face while he was riding a bike, but you can't tell if those scrapes were a result of him just like falling off the bike or like result of abuse. So there's nothing like too definitive there, but he just wanted to escape his life. He wanted to get to Tokyo. And it's another major theme in both the movies is that the desire to escape from like the ruralness, because in Japan, there's like the major distinction between rural Japan and places like Tokyo, like super ultra urban Japan. And a lot of people want to escape from that, like the more traditional rural settings, conventions, conservative beliefs, and so forth, and move to these more liberal, big city areas, like new ideas, stuff like that. And then you have Hina, who mom dies at the beginning of the film. You see that right away, and then dad's nowhere in the picture, so she has to take care of her little brother. And so you have these two people, and then they end up meeting, and then Hina ends up gaining the ability to control the weather. But the main thing of the movie then is, as long as Hina is alive on Earth in the mortal realm, there will be horrible weather. Like, it was raining super, super hard every day in the movie, basically. And yeah, so basically she is literally the source of climate change in this movie, which was a little bit interesting if you want to take a climate change perspective on the movie. But like, comparing the two films, like Weathering with You did not feel as effective. Like, it kind of felt like it had an identity crisis where it didn't know whether it wanted to be like a thought-provoking film or whether it wanted to be like just a mass appeal, feel-good film. And that's very, very hard represented by its ending, because there's the ending of the film and then there's an epilogue to the film. So the ending of the film is actually a bit thought-provoking, because you basically have this situation where Hina has left the mortal world. She is in the clouds, and there's great weather now. There's normal weather has returned to Japan. Everything is great in terms of the weather. But our main character, Hadoka, is like, man, this girl is like the only good thing that's ever happened to me in my life. I love her. I want her back. And it's obviously a very selfish desire, because everybody else is benefiting from the great weather. But he's obviously, missing Hina now, and he's longing for her. So it actually brings up the discussion, like, so he ends up going and saves Hina from the clouds and brings her back, which ends up bringing all the bad weather back, and ends up flooding Tokyo. It doesn't, say anything, but it's implied, a bunch of people are going to die. The whole city is going to be destroyed. Tons of people are going to die, that kind of thing. But so it brings up is, should Hadoka self-sacrifice, like give up Hina for the greater good of other people, or is he justified in engaging in this very selfish behavior because the world has not treated him well? Like, the world has treated him like mostly crap for his entire life. So what does he owe the other people then? Like, that's actually, it's a pretty question, and it's obviously easy to answer. Well, he should just care about other people, but that's a lot easier sentiment for us to push onto other people than to actually enact ourselves. So I was like, that's a pretty thought-provoking ending. But then you end up having the epilogue, which, okay, first it was really confusing because I thought it was a flashback, but it was actually the present. And yeah, basically he ends up, it's 3 years after the main story, and our main dude, Hadoka, he runs into his caretaker, who has like reinvented his life, because his caretaker, after he ran away, like the one that took him in, he was like a drunkard. He gambled. He played pachinko, which is a Japanese form of gambling. And he like reinvents his life. He's working at like a respectable business now, and he's got his stuff together, because the guy who took him in, I think it was I'm going to call him Mr. Sudoka. That might be very wrong. But Mr. Sudoka, basically, it's implied that his wife died, and now he no longer has custody of his children. And he obviously has never really gotten over the past and gotten over the fact that his wife died. He still extremely misses her. Like, you see him in the movie, he's playing around with his wedding ring, like the entire movie. And yeah, he obviously has not gotten over that past and not been able to move on from it, which is also, I would say, a major theme in the movie, and something I talked about in the last, is trying to be able to get over you. Did I talk about that? Yeah, I'll just say this in case I didn't. It's like a major theme of going to therapy for me is the idea that the past doesn't completely control you, is that every waking moment you have free will over your actions. Yes, it is easy to fall into like what you know best, and the forces that crafted you that you didn't control as like a child and stuff like that, and the trauma that you went through. But in every waking moment, we do have the ability to shape ourselves. It's just extremely difficult because you have to make an active effort. So yes, how did? Oh yeah, so yes, I was talking about the epilogue, right? So he goes to see Mrs. Sudoka, and Mr. Sudoka basically says probably the most epitomizing line of the entire film. Like, it's obvious, it's almost like wink wink from the director, like, hey, this is the moral of the film. It's basically like, it says, life is crazy and it always has been, so don't sweat the small stuff. That was, and I was like, that was probably the most quotable and, like I said, epitomizing line of the whole film. And so yeah, he goes and sees him, and then he goes and he's just walking around, and of course all of a sudden he sees Hina up on a hill, and they have this, good old fairy tale ending reunite. And it's like, that just doesn't feel right after it just feels so contrived after this very nice, thought-provoking ending, very beautiful ending too. Yeah, that is one thing about the film. Both films, Your Name and Weathering with You, absolutely beautiful. Like, me and my friend were making fun of the whole movie that most, like 95% of the shots in Weathering with You are desktop background worthy, because I don't know, the film is gorgeous. There was especially this one scene with fireworks, and it looked absolutely breathtaking. Like, I can, like, the creativity and the work that went into creating the visuals for this film, like A++, like 10 out of 10, like best aspect of the film by far. Yeah. And so I don't know. And especially with Weathering with You, there was they tried to pack in a bunch of side characters and like their stories, but they never actually led anywhere. So it's like, if you're going to include a side story that I'm going to show me and you're going to want me to be like at least semi invested in, it needs to have more sustenance to it. Like, and I say that because a lot of the characters in the film are like pretty much just complete plot devices. Like, they don't have much, like barely any character development of their own. They're just means to advance the plot. Like, so Mr. Sudoka's, who you find out, who you're made to assume is his mistress for the entire film and turns out to be his niece, Natsumi, is basically there just to re-explain to the audience what's going on. Like, and she also serves a plot device at the end where there's this there's this car chase scene where Natsumi and Hadoka are on a motorbike, and she also serves to like inspire Hadoka to be like, go get him, champ, basically, when he ends up trying to go and save Hina. But yeah, she's just there to re-explain things for the audience. Like, she's also there for at the beginning for like this weird joke where Hadoka walks into their apartment and she's sleeping and he stares at her boobs. Like, she's there for that, I guess. But yeah, so she doesn't really. And also, like, there was Hina's little brother who basically all he does is serve as motivation for Hina to like self-sacrifice, is because she gave up. She was working hard for him. She wanted him to have the best life possible. But his character himself, he's like 9 for one thing, and he's a womanizer. He has like these 2 girls you see him like hitting up at the same time throughout the whole story. But basically the only part that fulfills is when he ends up getting locked in the police station later in the film, and then he ends up using his 2 girlfriend exes, whatever they were, as a way to escape. And then he ends up showing up in like the final confrontation and ends up taking out one of the cops. Yeah, he's just like, he didn't have any motivation for himself. And I actually saw a thing about this on one of the reviews I watched, is that this film is told entirely from Hadoka's perspective, unlike Your Name, which was told from both perspectives. So you got to hear both characters' motivation and thought process, and you got to really experience both characters. You only got Hadoka's perspective from this movie, and so so you naturally didn't really get as much from other people, which was a letdown. Well, yeah, so I just overall, I also one thing I'll say about the film is I'm going to reserve my complete judgments for it because me and my friend watched the English dub of it, which had some weird moments, like when they Hidoka and Hina were eating, and then all of a sudden they said "bon appetit," and I was like, that just didn't feel right. That didn't feel like what was in the original script, and it was just a translation to make it so we like us English speakers would actually know what was going on. So I'm going to reserve their judgment until I watch. I want to watch the movie at another point in sub to see if any of the delivery of the lines or how things are written changes or changes on my perspective on anything that happens. So yeah, if I had to give an overall review, I would probably give it like a 8 out of 10. Like the movie is interesting. It drove me forward. I wanted to find out what was going to happen next. Like it's a good film. It's an enjoyable film. I believe, especially if you come into the film and if you like the format of your name, to come into the expectation that, hey, I probably won't like it as much as your name, then you're going to have a good time. But if you're going to constantly make comparisons to your name, you're going to, you're definitely not going to enjoy it as much. So yeah, so that is probably all I'm going to say about. I didn't even talk about Your Name, but that I didn't really need to. That movie's just great. Yeah, the end. Like, okay, I'll compare the ending of Your Name for a second. Your Name, we just went for a very satisfying ending. It didn't go for huge thought provoke. It like knew what it wanted. It just wanted to give this nice, bring everything together, satisfying ending to the people watching. I was like, yep, that makes sense. Great ending. But then because I don't know, Weathering with You wanted to do too many things at one time, it ended up just hurting itself because of that. It just did not have a defined identity of what exactly it wanted to be. So yes. So I guess I'll just kind of talk about my perspective on, the meaning of life, which, a natural transition from a movie. I know I said this before. What the heck? Someone's trying to show off their motorcycle, trying to get the ladies, I suppose. If I was a lesser person, I might say that they were compensating, but that's body shaming. And I actually had a conversation, that reminds me, I had a conversation with a person. I was like, why is body shaming of dudes more socially acceptable? Because I was like, and they're basically like, well, men haven't been historically marginalized. And I was like, so it's seen when you body shame men or target men with stuff like that, you're punching up. And so therefore it doesn't have the same level of like, what's the word I'm looking for? It's just not seen as poorly by people, which I was like, it makes sense. But, eventually we should also try to make, if people see body shaming as a bad thing, then yes, the body shaming of all individuals should be seen as a bad thing. And I'm not that, that even just reminds me of the All Lives Matter thing, which is his own little debate. It's, when people chant All Lives Matter, it should, I believe some people do think it means all lives should matter, but, as we see in society, it does definitely, with the disproportionate discrimination and persecution of minorities, especially those in the African American community, it definitely does not seem like all lives do matter, even if they should matter. So, but that's its own little subject. I didn't really want to get into that, but that's just happened what my brain happens. So what I was gonna say, the meaning of life. So this is how I believe, and I will say I am a scientist, so that, if you want to bring that in, is so we started life, with the Big Bang, and the universe just was made out of these small little building blocks of atoms. And eventually those atoms bumped into each other, ran into heat sources and stuff like that, and were able to join together to create more complicated things. So you went from hydrogen to helium, and then you went from helium to the bigger atoms up to iron, and then stars exploded, and then the iron came together and made the bigger elements, and so forth. So, but I'm not gonna focus on the very beginning. I'm gonna skip to like beyond the formation of the Earth. So I imagine you had a bunch of different, at this point, a bunch of different molecules, and they were all just kind of randomly moving around, bumping into each other, and just it's just like a huge pool of molecules. And I shouldn't say anything. I'm not 100% confident. I believe at that time it was an anaerobic Earth, and so you just had these things bumping into each other, and then eventually that led to the formation of the first living organism. And you'd be like, the formation of the first living organism is such an abysmally small chance to happen. Yes, it is basically zero, but it is not zero. Like, it happened in my mind, so therefore the probability has to be zero. It's just that you had all these chemicals randomly bouncing into each other for millions upon hundreds of millions of years, and then eventually the probability, it just happens once, and then you end up getting the first living organism. And then I think it's fairly natural to conclude that the organism then survived if its genetic material, its genes it had, then gave it, like, it didn't give it a will to survive, but it gave it the ability to survive. Like, hard-coded into it was like ability to survive and reproduce. So the organisms that had the ability to survive, adapt to their environment, and then reproduce were the ones that then kept going on. So eventually all the organisms on Earth, because we all started from the one specific first organism, developed an intrinsic ability, like I'll call it a desire to survive, even though I wouldn't say genes have, that's weird to say an inanimate object like a gene would create the desire to survive, but I will, for simplification's sake, all organisms have a desire to survive. And, that happened for a long time. You just had organisms living, reproducing, going on in this cycle because they had a desire to survive. But then all of a sudden, this weird mutation happened that led to humans and some other more intellectually developed organism. Is that we developed abstract thought. So we developed abstract thought, and then all of a sudden I believe once we developed abstract thought, we had this realization of, why do I have a desire to survive in a world that is intrinsically meaningless? Like, the world's meaningless. I'm going to live, I'm going to die. Why does anything matter? And I believe then is when we created the meaning of life. Is we wanted to create give meaning to life in order to satisfy that question of why we wanted to live in a world that is intrinsically absurd and weird and causes so much despair, and where it seems like pain and suffering is the natural course of things. We wanted to create an explanation, so we created individual meanings of life. And that's, so what do I want to say? So that's my explanation for where, like, the meaning of life. And I believe that everybody has the ability to find their own meaning of life. It's anything that helps you deal with the absurdity and despair of life is a meaning of life to me. Is that constant struggle, that constant fight against that nothing matters. Nothing in this life matters one single bit. We, ashes to ashes, dust to dust, we will die. Nothing we did will ultimately matter. But we can make it feel like it matters. We can derive joy from the things that we do. We can find happiness. We can make our life, that absurd quest from birth to death, more enjoyable. We can reduce its suffering. And then, you might ask, okay, how some people's meaning of life is seemingly to cause harm. I think, well, because everybody has the ability to find their own meaning of life, anybody can define whatever they want to be. And then you might ask, okay, why are there more socially acceptable all around the world? There are more socially acceptable meaning of life. And if my meaning of life was to murder every other person on the planet, why is that not socially acceptable like anywhere in the world? Well, I believe it's because as there was an advantage when we were first cavemen to coming together and working together to survive rather than all being completely lone wolves, as people were able to provide skills that maybe another person wouldn't be able to. So there was some mutual benefit. But the thing is, a group dynamic only works if everybody in the group doesn't murder each other, for instance, and works together. And so I believe they're developed then more socially acceptable. And because the same process, I believe, happened all around the world. And what makes a good group dynamic, I think, is fairly innate. It's not going to be extremely diverse around the world, but people did take different approaches to it, which is what led to the different beliefs all around the world. But I believe that's why there are innate things in everybody's beliefs around the world, like murder is bad, hurting others is bad, kind of thing. Yes, and so, but then I believe religion was created as a source to try to provide that meaning, because I've deliberated more recently, and then while I thought I was more agnostic, I would more consider myself atheist now. It's just that I believe religion came up because for ideas like what is truth. I believe humans do not have the ability to define what is true and what is true and what is not, because I believe what is usually regarded as truth is just the more collective agreement on what seems to align most with reality. But that goes into a whole discussion of what is reality exactly. Yeah, that's its own thing. So I believe that humans wanted to create instead of saying the complexity of, well, what I think is good might not be what you think is good. I believe people then wanted to say these behaviors are good. So, and that's where religion spurned up, because this goes into the idea of what motivates people to change their behavior. And the people's change of behavior, I often think, is not motivated by very logical things. If it was motivated by logical, climate change wouldn't be an issue, because everybody would be acting completely sustainable right now, because it's the logical thing to do. But I think people are very much more motivated by emotional matters, emotional means, and being convinced. Like, it is a change of heart, not a change of mind, that will get people to change their behaviors. So, and I believe, and also that's why I think stories have so much power, because they appeal to or stories and artists and musicians have such an ability to touch us and change us in ways that raw data and science cannot. And that's also why I believe the effort to make climate change should be one more focused, like, on getting musicians, artists, and creative folks to persuade people rather than scientists, because I don't think scientists are going to be able to convince people. So yeah, so back to religion. So I think whoever first created religion had this realization, and therefore created religion as it provides a lot of comfort to then know, well, like, what happens to me after death? Well, as a person who I honestly don't know a lot about religions besides Christianity. I'm just going to use Christianity as an example, but every different religion has an example, different explanation for like what happens after death and so forth. Like, oh, you go to heaven if you've been a good person. You go to hell if you're a bad person. It's a very simplistic, ordered explanation, and it provides a lot of explanation to why things are in this life, because you're either living by God's will or you're not living by God's will, and stuff like that. So then, and also I believe a lot of the practices, I've had a friend argue this to me before, is that a lot of the practices in religion were made to help people survive, because like don't eat shellfish for instance. Well, shellfish were notoriously disease ridden because they weren't cooked, they were pestered with disease, so you didn't eat shellfish because you were unlikely to get disease and stuff like that. So I believe religion created from as for like how science came to be, is it came to be as an explanation for why life is the way life is. And while I think science focused on observing the world around us for that explanation and focusing on what we can physically see, like religion took a much more spiritual, storytelling, creative approach to that and appealed to these divine entities which we can't, interact with or see on a daily basis. Yes. So my whole point. So this was more just me kind of just telling my thoughts on kind of the meaning of life and how I think life came to be. I am a staunch believer in evolutionism rather than creationism. Yeah, and I believe that yeah. So that's what I believe. So I think that'll be I can only record for 45 minutes on this recording software I'm using, and I'm already at 41 minutes, so it's definitely not good to go into another topic. But so I just want to get in, if you've made it to this point, thank you. Thanks a ton for coming out and watching this weird dude ramble on about random topics for so long. And if you use these to fall asleep, I wouldn't blame you. I think it'd be a very good way to do that. So yeah, thank you to everybody for watching, and I will continue to plan on making more of these in the future, because they're just very, I don't know what it is, just talking about my thoughts. It's just very soothing and creating, just very nice. It's something I've always wanted to do and just never really acted upon, but because this webcam I'm using up here to record, I ended up getting from my advisor, because I needed one for the GRE. And then I had that, and I just had a thought of, what if I did this? And now I'm doing it, and I'm liking it a lot. So it's just really fun. And I think eventually, if in the random chances got going, I would definitely make this more structured and actually write down my points or things I wanted to address beforehand, rather than literally talking for 45 minutes off the top of my head. But, that's just the way it is for now. And I thoroughly enjoy this. So, everybody stay safe. Try to live, realize that you have control over who you want to be in every present moment, even though that can seem entirely ridiculous and absurd at points. And it can be extremely difficult, for instance, if you're suffering from depression, because depression can really comes to grip with you. But in that situation, I would argue that you have the ability to decide of whether you want to go seek out treatment and to help yourself, or you want to just experience, symptoms of depression. Like, either way, you're going to have depression, but it's whether you want to help limit the negative effects of it or not. And I think a lot other people can, help in a lot of ways. But I think at the end of the day, it comes down to whether you want to help yourself or not, or if you want to try to find a greater meaning in life than, if you're depressed just laying in bed all day. Like when that happened to me, like the only thing that got me up, and I literally said to myself, I don't know why I'm getting up, but I know I need to get up. Like, this is not the way I want to live. So yeah, my ending just really expanded there. But again, thanks everybody for watching, and goodbye.